Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the OrangeNerd Show. We're going to talk about that Hollywood Reporter article about Bob Iger's long goodbye, this really crazy transition into the Bob Chapek CEO era right now. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of OrangeNerd. Thank you so much for joining us today. I brought my good friend with me, Mr. Vaskai, on the panel to discuss this really crazy Hollywood Reporter article. What's going on, Dre? How you doing, man?
Oh man, it's been one heck of a week now, hasn't it? A bunch of news, bunch of drama, all Disney all the time, whether it's theme parks, the studios. Man, it's all over the place. So I'm really happy to be here, really happy to talk about some of it, and can't wait to dive in.
Yeah, let's dive right in. Let's get down to the meat of this.
Absolutely.
So first of all, the artwork is phenomenal.
It is. But it does set the tone for what's to come, shall we say.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to kind of go through this. So it's Bob Iger's long goodbye, right? Mm-hmm. And it starts off pretty cinematic. 18 months into the media's most consequential transition, Disney's respected ex-CEO lingers while successor Bob Chapek provokes anxiety as he moves aggressively to reshape the Magic Kingdom. So it already starts off like, woo, this is getting hot.
It's Bob Iger's long goodbye and Bob Chapek's cold hello is what that is.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's pretty wild. So let's go through this. So I guess it says here in June, Disney's board and top management flew to the company's Aulani Resort in Hawaii for their annual retreat. It was executive chairman Bob Iger's last official appearance at such gathering. With retirement looming, former theme parks and resort chief Bob Chapek had already taken the reins as CEO in February 2020. This was the first time in 15 years that Iger would not be presiding. Okay, so that's interesting. So real quick, this next paragraph, and then we're going to kind of give our opinions so far. But Iger decided to open the meeting by offering his parting advice, a longtime critic of over-reliance on market research rather than instinct and taste. He made an inspirational plea for the value of talent. He touched on the challenges of managing creators, but stressed that every transaction at Disney parks, consumer products, movies, and television start with creativity. What are your thoughts on that, Dre, in regards to kind of like Iger's comments of starting with creativity first, always?
Well, I think that is endemic of his philosophy, right? Bob Iger was a very kind of creative or deferred to creatives quite a bit. He was always kind of creative first when it came to any projects. So, his kind of style, it wasn't Michael Eisner's kind of micromanager style. And we've said this before, right?
Right.
Bob Iger's style was very much like laissez-faire, like, hey, look, I'm going to put the pieces together to do what you do, whether that's, I mean, in the case of Pixar and Marvel, it was just purchase, throw a little bit of money at them and go ahead, do what you were going to do, just do it bigger than what you were going to do. And here's a little nice, bag of cash, make sure you return with a bigger one, that kind of thing. Right. And that's good. It has its, benefits and drawbacks. Benefit wise, you can get some really stellar stuff that maybe on paper, doesn't make any sense. Maybe from a data and analytics perspective doesn't make any sense, but can really turn a profit or kind of, snowball into a profit later down the line once you've established that franchise and so forth. There were losses. There were hits that the studio incurred on behalf of this kind of thought processy, right? I mean, look at Solo, look at, even going back, John Carter of Mars, and just a couple of other things that, it's like, hey, you defer to creators. Mars needs moms, right? You defer to creators, and, that could really kind of, you can kind of eat it a little bit there. And I remember them kind of having to incur those costs over the entire range of the Disney media conglomerate. So it really kind of is fascinating that he's putting it out there, and I think he kind of knew that Chapek was an analytics guy, and he was kind of preferring that he not go in that direction.
Yeah, a couple of things here, like what you just closed out with in terms of he knew he was a data analytics guy. That's one thing about this article that I'm at issue with, is that there's this sort of energy on this article of like this kind of shocked Bob Iger. I don't believe that. Look, Bob Chapek has been with the company for, I think, about 30 years now. And 15 of those years, he was under Bob Iger. And he wasn't just, a cast member handing out churros. This guy was in high-level positions while Bob Iger was CEO. The fact that Bob Iger was just kind of caught off guard by how data-driven Chapek was. Come on. No. He knew. He
knew. I mean, this just makes it very clear that he knew that. This makes it very clear that he's sending signals across the table going, hey, look, Chapek, buddy, pal. I mean, whether it be, Iger's kind of predilections or kind of preferences towards entertainment, so to speak, his kind of personal preferences and biases, or, maybe he had longstanding relationships that, he himself or maybe Disney wanted to maintain, and kind of knew that maybe Chapek, could ruffle those feathers, so to speak. I'm not quite sure, but I mean, look, that kind of deferral kind of mentality, like I was saying before, to creatives, I mean, that has gotten the company into trouble. And I think Chapek is like, hey, look, listen, and we've talked about this before with Chapek. It's like, when he's saddled with something like a Solo and he can't move product, I mean, who pays for that? What consequences are incurred on behalf of those creators because of that kind of decision, that kind of, I mean, it does send shockwaves throughout the entire company, and Chapek's not looking to do that. His big thing is yield management. Everything is going to be efficient. Everything is going to be, if it's not a hit, it's going to at least make money, that kind of thing. And the way you do that is data driven. So it really is kind of this interesting dynamic with this meeting right here, this kind of conflict of the minds, even before Chapek really gets going.
Yeah, and here's the thing too, is I think it's a little bit, and again, we don't really know. This is kind of like people relaying this to Hollywood Reporter. So a lot of this might be out of context, and we'll get into that a little bit later on with this article, because Iger kind of disputes some of these past articles a little bit, in what they're reporting. But I will say this, Iger hasn't been this kind of, look, I think he's been good for the creative process overall, but he hasn't always led with creativity. I mean, look, let's be real. Like, there's a lot of Iger's critics think he's too political. Yeah. A lot of the decisions he makes is kind of like socio-political things come first, and then the creativity will follow, right?
And that's starting to show up in the content.
Right. So it's like, okay, so you're saying creativity first, but it's not always creativity first. It's, well, we need more of this. Can you make that happen? And then the creativity follows, right? Right. So it's, I agree with Iger's comments that creativity should drive everything, but even with his IP push, that's essentially those are data-driven decisions. Yeah, absolutely. That's something that he's looking at and saying, hey, IP sells the most. He even said it himself. Expedition Everest was a nondescript mountain, It's not as appealing as a franchise. That's data-driven. That's not much different than something Chapek would do. But, you know what I'm saying? So it's a very data-driven thing. So I feel like, at least in the context of the article, it's a little disingenuous from how it's presented. Like Iger kind of lecturing on this because, okay, if you really believe creativity comes first, then where are all the original attractions at Disneyland? Well, why are we getting franchise after franchise if it
Right.
wasn't always about like not data, no data, right? No data,
Yeah. Yeah.
creativity. So I'm having a little hard
Hmm.
time buying it a little bit here. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. No, you bring up a great point. And I was just thinking along those lines as you were saying it. It's like, well, that's kind of, now that OG says this is kind of a little bit of hypocrisy coming from Iger, because like you said, it's like Animal Kingdom. I'm sorry, not Animal Kingdom, but Expedition Everest in Animal Kingdom, right? Expedition Everest, that was all creative. That was, birthed out of the mind of Joe Rohde and others to present that attraction that had no other. I don't know. It had no other thing going for it other than, hey, look, let's create this incredible story that's wholly original onto itself, right? And it's like that's far more creative, you could argue, than just kind of taking an IP and fleshing it out in the form of an attraction. So it is kind of interesting how he would say that, right? And you bring up a great point with that. But your first point about, look, Iger hasn't been shy about his kind of political leanings and so forth, and how it's like, hey, look, we should take a stand on some issues, and that shouldn't just be limited in what we say, but in what we produce. And I do have to wonder how much of these comments right here that he's speaking about is just Chapek saying, hey, look, let's not shy away from this, even though it might not ring true with the analytics. And how Chapek's just, it's whatever makes money. Right. It's whatever, it's whatever. And he said this before. We're going to be consumer driven. We're going to have consumer preferences in mind with whatever we create. And if the kind of social political aspects of what we produce become unfashionable, it might have to take a second seat.
Right. Yeah, it's it's interesting already. 2 paragraphs in, and
I know, it's crazy, right?
There's a lot to digest. So we're going to kind of continue. I mean, a lot of this stuff was kind of already reiterating what we kind of already discussed, and but it says here that sources who attended the meeting say Chapek did not make such a bold declaration, meaning, Disney being a data-driven company now. Yeah. They say he was merely being himself, a numbers-oriented, bottom-line focused businessman, lacking creative experience and without Iger's polish and flair. Nonetheless, the retreat anecdote dovetailed with a narrative that was already taking hold among Iger confidants, that he had lost faith in Chapek and that his speech before the board was a final warning that Disney was veering off course. And the idea of the wrong man at the helm of Disney stoked a lot of anxiety in an industry that has seen Fox and MGM swallowed up, Warner Media battered by AT&T, and Paramount transforming into a shadow of itself. Now, this I want to address real quick, because in this particular paragraph, it sounds so dire. Yeah. Not only is Disney in jeopardy here with Chapek, but Hollywood. Yeah. This is like a meteor event hitting Earth, basically, right? This is like existential. Hollywood, Disney, everything is in jeopardy now because this guy is running Disney. And here's the thing. It says here, among quote unquote Iger confidants. Okay. So they're implying that it's coming kind of from the Iger camp. This is all coming from the Iger camp. Now, when you scroll down, and we'll come back up here, but when you go down to the very end with Iger, this last quote, Iger says it will all become very clear. Quote, he's very different from me, meaning Chapek. And then he goes on to say, quote, that doesn't mean he can't do the job well. Give him time. It's the only fair thing to do. Well,
that's a ringing endorsement.
It's not exactly. Yeah. But it's not exactly, though. The thing that I was trying to say is that's not exactly the same energy I'm getting from what these confidants are saying.
Right.
Because the confidants are saying this is like, and kind of like
Yeah.
end times, like the meteor is hitting Hollywood because Chapek is running the show. Disney's veering off course. There's a total disaster looming.
Right.
And Iger's like, well, give him time, see how he does. This is the issue I kind of have with the article, is that the narrative of the overall article doesn't really fit with what Iger and even Feige is saying. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It seems like there's like a disconnect there.
Yes. Yeah. This is, I think, if I had to put my head into the writer of this article, I think the initial comments they got from Iger and Feige were a little bit, I think there's an agenda to be pushed here. There's a narrative to be pushed here. And when those were inconsistent, not consistent with that narrative, it was like, okay, well, I'm going to go searching. And they bring a lot of other people in here to kind of reinforce this narrative of, oh, Chapek bad, Iger was good, but now he's leaving, and, what's going to happen to Disney, and it creates this kind of dire, set of consequences here. But at the same time, look, Chapek did, I can't believe I'm defending Chapek here again, but we got to be fair, right?
And that's what, not to interrupt you, but that's what I love about our channel and our conversations is that we're probably the only content creators that actually give him a fair shake.
I think so. It's quite fast. Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what separates our channel out a lot. If I could speak, if I could speak openly about that.
Absolutely.
But Chapek, he did get Disney through the pandemic and largely unscathed, largely intact too. You would have thought that, with how, with the loans they were drawing out and the decisions that they had to make, you would have thought they would have had to sell off divisions of the entire company just to stay afloat, and they didn't, right? They did, keep totally whole. And I know how it's phrasing this last sentence, right? With MGM getting swallowed up and Warner Media and stuff and Paramount and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, do you not think that Chapek understands that? He's looking at this going, that's us. We're next if we don't do, a rethink on what we've been doing so far.
Right.
That could be we could be any one of those companies getting swallowed up by some big tech giant or whatever. And, we've completely lost our autonomy, and who knows what happens after that. And I will say, they kind of create this, it's kind of, I don't know, it's this caricature of a person, right? Where it's like, oh, it's, we got 60 seconds for lunch, and, 60 seconds for small talk, and then we got to get to business, and then we're off. It's like, he understands the urgency of this moment. The entertainment landscape is changing fundamentally. It's just changing so much and so fast, and Chapek understands that he doesn't want to be on the back end of that, and he's making tough decisions in order to secure Disney's position as top dog. And so, I don't know. You got to give him credit for that, and he has been successful thus far.
Yeah. It's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. This is a fascinating article. It's actually
crazy.
It's crazy. It's actually one of my favorite, Succession articles, that I've seen from the trades, yeah. It's not a hit piece. Like, I even texted you the other day, like, this is not a hit piece. There's a lot of juicy stuff kind of from both angles, but it just kind of dives into stuff that we really don't know. But so it says here, let me see, I kind of lost my position here a little bit, but it says here that Iger won't address the Alani meeting, but says from his standpoint, the transition has gone as planned. I guess he's saying that he has continued to oversee the creative side as Chapek took on the day-to-day running of the company. Quote, the whole thing was sort of my construct with ultimate buy-in and full support of the board. Iger says of the succession plan, I would be around to mentor him for a year and a half while I was concentrating on the creative. He would, get up to speed on all things Disney in that period of time. And then by the time I gave up my Disney ID card, we'd have a transition about as smooth as can be. So it says here one more thing, and then we'll kind of dive into this. Chapek
Totally buttery smooth, Iger. Buttery smooth so far.
buttery smooth, right? Right? Like a hot knife through butter, baby.
Right. Go ahead. Sorry.
Chapek declined to comment on the process, but even as Iger lingered, Chapek moved quickly to seize control, reorganizing the company in a way that diminished the power of some key Iger lieutenants as others have exited. Quote, every creative person is leaving or losing power, laments one former Disney level executive. Now, I do want to kind of talk about this because there's a couple things going on here. Like we talked in a video just recently, actually, about how aggressive Chapek has moved. And we both agree that it is more aggressive than we thought.
Way more.
But this whole idea of like the new guy replacing like the old guy's lieutenants, right? And kind of putting his own people, that's so normal, you guys. That's so par for the course. I've had so many jobs, whether it be on a CEO, I wasn't a CEO, but like with my company that I work for, if we got a new CEO, a lot of his close lieutenants were replaced with the new guy's lieutenants. And there usually is, even with like, if you have a new manager of your like department, usually there are changes with, with the people around that manager and what have you. That's a very normal thing. And it's kind of funny in this article, they kind of paint that as some sort of like authoritarian kind of move. But believe me, when Iger took over, he replaced a lot of Eisner's lieutenants. It's just the way it works. And you know what? The next guy or gal who replaces Chapek will, believe it or not, spoiler alert, will replace a lot of Chapek's lieutenants. It's just the way it works, you guys. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. They do characterize it in this kind of Machiavellian, like, oh, look, he's taking out Iger's guys. Oh, bad. Bald man, bad. Look, listen, here's the thing. Okay?
Bald man, bad. I like that.
Exactly, right? But here's the thing, okay? The CEO sets the tone, and we all get that. How do you think that process happens? Okay? Do you think he just puts up bulletin board and say, this is my vision, go ahead, carry it out? No, he gets people consistent with his vision. He gets people that are on his side, that are kind of, simpatico and all the stuff that he wants to do, and they literally carry that out. And get everybody down the line in line with Chapek's grand plan and master vision. So, it's just, I mean, look, I don't mean to get too political here, but we accept it with like the presidency, right? There's a new administration, they bring in their guys, and we see what happens after 4 years, kind of thing, right? We accept that in politics. Understand, folks, it happens in executive board rooms too, with corporations and companies. So there's nothing nefarious about that.
Yeah, that was very much a kind of like a pretty standard standard move. Now, I don't know if you guys remember, this is kind of a little bit of a I'm going to kind of go off course a little bit. It's still kind of related, but when Bob Iger took over, it was like soon after the Pixar acquisition. It was pretty early on in Iger's tenure as CEO.
Right.
Michael Eisner actually had a show, his own talk show on CNBC. He had his own show.
Really?
He did. And he actually interviewed Bob Iger. And this was right around the time that Bob Iger just purchased Pixar, right?
Okay, so this would have been 2006, 2007.
Right, exactly. Around that time frame.
Iger steps in 2005, just to, everybody knows the timeline.
Exactly. And Iger and Michael Eisner kind of had, it was a friendly kind of debate, but Michael Eisner, I couldn't believe it, how bold Eisner was on this interview. He really was bold. He said, I completely disagree with you in terms of you buying Pixar. I think you overpaid for it. He literally said that. He told Iger, you overpaid for it. Bob Iger made his case. He said, I disagree. I think that basically, why buy the carton of milk when you can buy the cow? That's essentially what he said, which is absolutely correct in that.
Absolutely.
But the reason why I bring that up is because anytime you have these transitions from an old CEO to a new CEO, you're going to have these disagreements. it seems like a lot of these trades, they sort of paint any disagreement that these two men have as a scandal.
Yeah.
It's very normal for an old CEO and an incoming CEO to have disagreements. These are going to be two different people.
Right.
Chapek is not going to be a carbon copy of Bob Iger. He even mentions it in the article in quotes. There's going to be disagreements. Iger is not going to love every decision Chapek makes. It's just the way it works, you know?
Yeah. In Eisner's case, it was more profound, right? Because he was literally forced out. I mean, the reason why they're conflicting, I mean, that's why they're getting Iger, is because they want somebody of a different philosophy and mindset than the previous CEO in that case. It's interesting because we'll talk about Pixar a little bit later here, I think. But it's interesting not to get too off track, but that was the difference of Michael Eisner's philosophy, right? He's just like he had disagreements with Steve Jobs, with the Pixar guys, and he's just like, man, I don't even want to work with them. And there was a time there where they were going to end their relationship.
Yeah.
Just before the Save Disney campaign, stuff like that. And Iger was like, look, we have to bring these guys in. We have to actually, because we've done so much work with them in the past. They're now reflected in our parks. Can you imagine if Pixar went with any other studio and distributed films with them? We have to bring them in, and that's why he made that acquisition, huge acquisition, one of the largest up until the Fox deal, and and it paid off. And I think when we're stepping into Chapek here, it's he's, like you said, he's going to make decisions that are looked unfavorably by Iger, but that's Chapek's got a style, he's got a vision, he's got a grandmaster plan in a similar way that Michael Eisner may have agreed with Bob Iger, back in their day. Now, do you want me to read this next paragraph? And
oh yeah, go ahead. Which one are you gonna? This one right here?
The challenge confronting Chapek. That one.
Go for it. Let's do
it. Just to give your, just to give your a throat, so to speak, some brevity. The challenge confronting Chapek and the leaders of every other legacy entertainment company is daunting. They must serve Wall Street's obsession with building their streaming services without alienating creatives who still want a shot at the mind-bending paydays that come with success under a traditional model. In October 2020, major shareholder and activist investor Dan Loeb began to pressure Disney to double its investment in content for Disney+. In August, he pushed Disney to make, quote, tough choices and offer all theatrical content on the streamer the same day they open in theaters at no additional cost to subscribers. Quote, Disney investors are pushing Chapek to lean harder into streaming, even if it frustrates talent, which I think it did. Says
to say the least, right?
right. Says Lightshed Partners analyst Rich Greenfield. Quote, he has to balance that with managing talent and relationships, which becomes a little bit of an issue down the line, I'm sure.
Yes, to say the least. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the big look, and that's what we've talked about a lot, Vash, like in terms of this changing landscape in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of growing pains right now because a lot of these studios, they're kind of like, oh man, we have our own streaming platforms. We can get like pretty much 100% of the revenue if we just drop it on the streaming service. We don't need to share that with AMC. Great, cool,
Right.
And but then talent, gets they feel slighted. The theater industry feels slighted. So there's a lot of other kind of interest groups that have a problem with that,
Mm-hmm.
And it's a juggling act. And Wall Street loves it. Oh, they eat up the streaming services. I'm telling you right now, Disney could be down like in every division of the company in the next quarterly earnings report.
Right.
As long as Disney Plus is gaining subscriptions and making their goals or exceeding their goals, the stock will go up like, 4 or 5 points.
Right.
As long as Disney Plus is doing fine, Wall Street could care less about the parks. I'm not even kidding. I know a lot of park fans don't want to hear that. Wall Street does not care about the parks. They could care less. It's the Disney Plus show 100%.
And if they do, it's a second priority. I mean, it's not, in comparison to Disney Plus. Disney's still a studio. They still produce content, and that content's got to go somewhere. And when you say, hey, it can go on our platform and we have full distribution and control over it, I mean, that makes Wall Street investors salivate, and rightfully so. I mean, that's a very tantalizing offer. But as the article does point out, it's like, wait a minute here. You know, if you send this content on the streaming service, you know, without some in between kind of thing, I mean, you know, are you going to have what they classify as mind-bending paydays? At a certain point, you're going to be borrowing against the film and its potential revenue.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot of growing pains going on here, and I think that Chapek is sort of he's following the data like he always does.
He is.
And it seems like the next few months, like to finish off, you know, 2021, it looks like he's gonna keep things theatrical. You know, no promises beyond that, but you know, I mean, I think they still want to keep the option open for day and date if they need it, you know. But I mean, at least that's good news. At least that's good news overall, that he's at least up until like the end of the year, it's all going to be like theatrical exclusives, at least for a little bit, right?
Well, yes, and you know, that's for a number of reasons. But look, Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage did actually pretty well at the box office. You know, the James Bond, I think it's the 25th film in the franchise. Or,
No Time to Die.
No Time to Die. I do apologize, James Bond fans. I'm sorry. Look, man, I'm juggling all these franchises. I really do. Something's got to give, all right? But I mean, that's poised well to do very well at the box office, and I think I believe MGM is doing that. I think they'll be pleased with the outcome there, and I think Chapek, you know, he is analytics driven, and I think he got some word here that consumer confidence, at least in the theatrical space, was growing. And look, Shang-Chi, you know, paid off the grand experiment. It worked. It worked out, and that's what he's going to be doing here. Which is good to see for the theatrical model. But it is very interesting that you did have actual investors kind of like saying, like, "Hey, look, you know, throw it on Disney Plus, throw it on Disney Plus, throw it on Disney Plus," and it's like you can do that, you can, but again, that let's pump the brakes here and really figure out, you know, how to do that effectively without, you know, drowning out a film before it can fly.
And I gotta say, and I'm gonna this is a moment of candor here, like I've made no bones about it. I don't love the theater experience. I love watching movies in bed on my iPad. I love that. I'll watch the next Star Wars movie like that. I don't care. You know, that's just my thing. I just like the at-home experience. It's just my preference, you know. But this is a huge but right now. Like you mentioned, Dre, Bond started off very well.
Mm-hmm.
Shang-Chi is kicking major ass in the box office. Venom 2 is kicking major ass at the box office. And Free Guy, another theater exclusive, did very, very well.
Yeah.
Look, there's no denying, as much as I'm not a theater person, I gotta concede the theater experience is alive and well for a lot of people. A lot of people love that experience. It's kind of like going out to eat. Yeah, you can DoorDash, but you know, it's still fun to go out and actually sit at a restaurant, right? And a lot of people love that experience of going to the movies, sitting down and watching on the big screen. It's not for me, but a lot of people love it. And look, a lot of these movies are doing fantastic right now. Fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
So
breaking legitimate records, not just, you know, post-pandemic records.
That's true. Yeah, the Bond movie, the Bond movie, we don't know yet, but it had, like John Campea was talking about, it could hit up to $100 million this weekend, which would be a James Bond franchise record.
Wow.
So we're not even talking pandemic record. We're talking a James Bond franchise record, which, like you said, there's like, what, 25 plus movies already in the franchise? That's huge. So the theater experience is definitely doing very well right now. And look, hey, Chapek, if he's he's the data-driven guy that we think he is, he's looking at that. He's definitely looking at that. You know, I mean, you can't ignore it.
Well, it's Chapek wanting to be flexible. It's Chapek understanding like, hey, look, listen, there might be ebbs and flows in this. Right now you have a lot of people who are like, man, I just want to get out. I just want to, I just want to watch a movie. They may have, what has been described as COVID fatigue and stuff like that. It's like, I just want to get out. I don't want to watch a movie on streaming. At least not right now. I want to get out and see a film in the theaters. Sure. Chapek, smart enough, he's like, I think they do want to see a movie in theaters, and that's why the rest of the 2021 film slate is going to be out on theaters and not this kind of dual release program. And look, a dual release, in a hybrid program, I think could make its return at some point. But right now, they're riding the wave. They're using their kind of analytic, kind of consumer-driven model to kind of guess what consumers want at the moment, and like you said, they're going to be flexible. They're going to do it. So kudos to him.
Yeah, it's interesting. At the end of the day, before I move on, I think at the end of the day, Disney just wants that flexibility. They just want to have the ability to be like, hey, look, this movie Eternals, we're going to put that in, give it a theatrical exclusive for 45 days, but they just want to have that option if they need to have the day and date available, right? They just want that fluidity, But I think for the time being, though, the theaters are king right now. The theaters are absolute king right now. And Chapek, believe me, he's noticing. Vote with your wallet. If you love the theatrical experience, go see it in the theater. Vote with your wallet.
Right. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And you make a great point. It's Chapek, Disney, they want to have their fate in their hands going forward. They want to be able to make these decisions on the fly as the landscape, as ebbs and flows, and we'll see what comes out of that. Should we go on to the next paragraph here?
Let's do it. Yeah, here's a great picture of the king of franchises, Mr. Kevin Feige, with Bob Chapek. It says here that all that spilled dramatically into public view when Scarlett Johansson sued Disney over her payday for Black Widow, which was offered day of release on the service. Disney shocked Hollywood and sparked backlash with an aggressive response, accusing Johansson of indifference to the effects of the pandy. The suit was briskly settled, however, and Chapek is now getting some support from Disney's most important creative player, Marvel boss Kevin Feige. Won't address the Johansson litigation, but while he is not known for discussing Disney internal politics, he says the still new CEO is being underestimated. Quote, I think he is a creative guy, a nice guy, a real guy, end quote, Feige says, adding that Chapek offers just enough of an opinion to give good feedback on early cuts of movies and shows. Now, I do want to say one thing. There's actually, Feige in this whole article gives the most interesting stuff in terms of like his feedback. It kind of changing my mindset in regards to all of this stuff. I find it very interesting that he says that he thinks like a nice guy, a real guy. Okay, those are throwaway comments. It doesn't mean anything. Okay, that doesn't mean anything. But a creative guy, I've never heard of Chapek being referenced as a creative guy. So that's a little interesting that Kevin Feige, look, I get it. And everyone's going to say this, like he's just trying to kiss up to his boss. He's kind of keeping up appearances. And that may be true. But he doesn't have to say that. Do you know what I'm saying?
He doesn't. No, he doesn't.
No, and that's weird to me because I don't think of Chapek like, and I'm fair with Chapek. I don't hate on him. I'm not, like you said, bald man bad. I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
But a creative guy, I don't see Chapek as a creative guy. That was very interesting to me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, historically, we've not really seen the creative side of Chapek. I will say, though, I mean, there are rumors that he may have had insight in maybe Harmonious, now playing at Epcot, and definitely the move to kind of take Happily Ever After and exchange it for Enchantment. And from not to dive into the parks too much, but there was talk that Chapek was like, hey, we want to showcase Disney of today. We want to be very modern with it, and that's why you have a lot of, I mean, you have like the song from Frozen 2, for example. I mean, that's a very
Yeah.
kind of new movie for that, and that's him kind of flexing those creative muscles. What is it? To help provide reinforcement to his vision, of course, right? But that's kind of him. And this article goes into it. He might have a little bit more creative juices than we gave him credit for. So it is very, very interesting that Kevin Feige would say that. I think Kevin Feige, this article says, he says that the CEO is maybe underestimated. I think, me personally, I think Kevin Feige is being a little underestimated.
Oh yeah, Kevin Feige's brilliant. He is
Yep,
absolutely brilliant.
he is, and I think he's really brilliant in this space. Remember, he's been a producer for a long, long time. He's
Yeah.
navigated a lot of corporate waters over the years here, and I have my personal theories about that and why he might be. And you kind of alluded to it earlier, why he might be, giving Chapek all this praise, but we'll get into that as we go along here.
Okay, cool. And it says here, this is another thing I really want to kind of dive into. It says here, Chapek offers, quote, just enough of an opinion to give good feedback. Now, from the way I kind of interpret that line is basically he's not a micromanager. He's not imposing his views. He's not aggressively standing over the creative telling you, no, you got to do this. From what I gather from that line from Feige is basically Chapek gives just enough to kind of give like feedback, but it isn't overbearing. He kind of, in the role of a CEO, he gives enough, an appropriate amount of creative advice, but it's not like something that's like kind of like he's not like meddling, so to speak. Is that kind of how you took it too?
That's what he was trying to insinuate, yes. And I do wonder to what extent that's true, what extent that's false. Because I mean, he is making moves where, he's, for example, placing Kareem Daniel in his position where he is. He's making moves to kind of shift the balance of power here and not be so, as Iger would call it, creatively driven going forward and more consumer driven. And sometimes you got to rein those, creative juices back in to be in line with what consumers want. So it is kind of interesting how he's saying that, because what we've heard and what I've heard especially is he will meddle, where appropriate, and if you're veering off course, he'll set you back on it. So maybe he's giving the impression of how Chapek used to work back when he was head of Parks, Experiences, and Products. I'm not quite sure, but it is a little bit inconsistent with what I've heard.
And it's interesting because customer focus is one of those kind of like one of those buzzwords that like it's like and Chapek says it a lot. Customer focus, and we've talked about a lot on this channel. But customer focus is one of those things where it's kind of good, but then it can kind of be bad too. And I know a lot of people are going to push back on me on this in the comments, but hear me out a little bit with this. The Rise of Skywalker is a perfect example of kind of like too much customer focus.
Yeah.
It was trying to basically what Lucasfilm did was, look, we want to please every corner of the fandom.
Mm-hmm.
So the people that complain that Rey was a nobody, we're going to make her a Skywalker.
Or a Palpatine.
Right. Palpatine. Hey, Reylos, we got you. We're gonna do the kiss at the end, the big thing. It was every corner of the fandom we're gonna try to please. But the problem with that is when you try to please everybody, you please nobody.
Yep.
And that's a little issue with customer focused kind of driven policy, is that you're very much like chasing like the Reddit opinions, right? The Twitter and Reddit opinions. And you kind of come up with a convoluted mess a lot of times. So that is an issue. I mean, you kind of have to have a little bit of a just make a good movie kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to digress too far, but that is an issue. It can be an issue.
You're perfectly fine. You're perfectly fine. I would say to counter that, when you go a little bit more creative heavy and you don't take some of those consumer preferences into account, you get a very divisive film like The Last Jedi.
That's
you know,
true.
and so I
You got
look
to balance.
and look, you know, some people very much love that film. Some people very much hate that film, but that's where it
Yeah.
was, and it kind of put Rise of Skywalker into this kind of unwinnable position, and I think that's what kind of Chapek is looking to avoid here. And hey, look, I just prefer a happy medium, like you know, like Mandalorian, for example, right? Something that does
Yeah.
kind of appeal to fans, but it's also like, hey, we're going to create. I'm sorry, we're going to produce this story the way we want to produce it. There will be nods to the fans, and we'll do some things that fans like. But hey, look, listen, it's going to be our story at the end of the day. So, you know, we'll see which you know side of, you know, how balanced this equation is out going forward. It's going to be very fascinating.
It will be. And the thing too is like, it takes like, look, there's book smart intelligence and there's kind of like social intelligence or business intelligence.
Yeah.
And like Bob Iger seems to have a lot of like that kind of like that business intelligence in terms of like, he knows just the right amount of everything to kind of get the job done. He knows just the right amount of like pulling back, just the right amount of like stepping in, right? It's kind of an instinctual kind of like built-in hardwired kind of thing. Does Chapek have that? I don't know, but it definitely is. Like there's some people that just have it, you know, that just have that instinct, where to draw the line, where not to draw the line. We'll see if Chapek knows where that line is and where it isn't. You know, it'll be very interesting. Very, very interesting.
I think, you know, to kind of expand on that, I think personally, I think Chapek doesn't have that, and that's why he's leaning into data and analytics so heavily. And look, you know, it's not to say that that's necessarily like the wrong avenue to go, especially with as volatile as the market as it is, and you know, consumer preferences change and stuff like that, and sometimes your instincts, while relevant at one time, maybe not hold up later on down the line. Maybe we saw that a little bit with Bob Iger and Lucasfilm. Like, you know, some of that instinctual stuff, it got that whole kind of thing into trouble, and you know, that's where it can kind of lead you astray. And I think Chapek, he's using his, you know, kind of lived experience from working at the Disney company for so long, and saying, hey, this is the route we should really go here. So it's incredibly fascinating how this is all kind of shaping out.
It really is. It really is. Now to kind of continue, this is actually very fascinating to me. This actually surprised me with Chapek. It says, as head of theme parks, Chapek was a proponent of replacing Tower of Terror attraction with the Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout ride, which opened in 2017. Now that's a fan favorite now. You know, I mean, that was that was something that fans hated. You know, fans hated that idea. When it opened, it's a fan favorite. Me and you went on this a few weeks ago. That thing is intense.
It gets you. It gets you. But you remember how, I mean, you know, with the hardcores at Disneyland Resort, I mean, the fans were upset about that decision.
Right.
I mean, they really, really were. But to Chapek's credit, he knew how popular this would be. Not just among the fans that were kind of outraged about it, which that's kind of turned around, but really to the larger consumer demographic that he is targeting. And so when you look into the context of, like, you know, consumer driven, why aren't his decisions, you know, maybe consistent with that philosophy when it comes to the parks? It's like, no, they might be to a specific demographic that he's targeting. So that is fascinating in itself.
Very fascinating, very fascinating. And it goes on to say, Feige says he remembers an entire plane trip to Hong Kong listening to songs Chapek had recorded for the attraction and thinking, quote, this guy goes deep when it comes to contemporary artists, end quote. And after, yeah, that is weird. I really kind of blew my mind a little bit.
Can you imagine Chapek putting on the beats? Oh yeah, Feige's gonna love this, yo.
That blew my mind. Never would have guessed that at all. And it says, and after the record-breaking 2019 opening of Avengers Endgame, Chapek celebrated the Marvel team by installing a Dole Whip machine, a theme park favorite, in their offices. Quote, I thought that was pretty cool, Feige says. Quote, I thought that was great. That is actually one thing I do have to say that really kind of blew my mind with Chapek, because that was like, that doesn't seem like a very corporate thing to do. Like, that was very much like he understood the position he's in as I'm the theme park head, right?
Yeah.
What can I do for Marvel that's like on brand for the division I run, right?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of let and kind of have Marvel like enjoy it.
Yeah.
And that Dole Whip machine was such a perfect thing. It was like, hey, it's very Disney parks, but then when installed at Marvel Studios, it's fun for all the employees to kind of have that the Dole Whip machine there. It was such a perfect gift. It probably costed him nothing to do it, but I think it meant a lot, and I think it was a creative move. Believe it, maybe that's what Feige means by Chapek's creative. That was actually a very creative move in regards to kind of how to celebrate Endgame. I was kind of blown away by that. That was pretty cool, actually.
That was pretty cool. That was, and like you had stated before, Feige kind of almost humanizes Chapek in this way. That was kind of a very interesting kind of detail to have learned, and people were kind of critical about it online, like, oh man, Dole Whip machine's only $4,000,
Yeah.
But it's like, no, really think about that. I mean,
yeah,
it's something that the Marvel that the Marvel studio guys would appreciate. He understands that Kevin Feige is actually a really big fan of the parks, and that kind of machine among park fans would be pretty awesome to have. And so, I give him props to that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one thing that actually stood out for me. I was like, okay, that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool. That was a good move. Now, mind you, that was in 2019. He was kind of trying to finesse his way into the CEO spot, so he was working all the magic, but that was one thing that I think he really hit the nail on the head.
I think so.
Yeah, but then it goes into like a lot of this is kind of like, talking about the ScarJo stuff, which we've discussed a lot already. But basically it says here, clearly Chapek is not oblivious to this and has made efforts to diffuse the tension in regards to like talent and what have you. He says repeatedly spoken of his high regard of talent and creativity, and though a Johansson legal victory was not assured, the suit was quickly settled. Before that, Disney locked up a new deal with Emma Stone, whose Cruella went day and date on Disney Plus for $30, and committed to exclusive theatrical releases, which we touched upon, for the remaining of 2021 movies, though he committed to nothing beyond this year, which I expect that. They're not going to lock themselves into stuff. They want to have the fluidity, the flexibility.
Oh, yeah.
And then it goes on to say, like, but as Warner Media's Jason Kilar has learned, when talent is bruised, the marks heal slowly. After blindsiding the creative community in December by putting the studio's 2021 slate on HBO Max streamer, Kilar tried to make peace by writing big checks and agreeing to a 45-day theatrical window going forward, yet he is still apologizing for the original sin as recently as September 28th. Now, the interesting thing here is actually John Campea mentioned how Kilar, when Jason Kilar started Warner Media, he was actually very much a kind of Josh D'Amaro kind of figure.
Oh, interesting.
And he was very passionate about his job, rolled up his sleeves. He walked around the lot. He was greeting people. He loved it. And he turned out to be a total disaster. Now, look, I'm not saying D'Amaro's a disaster. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, as fans, be aware that just because a guy might be good looking, might be smooth, might kind of like, smooth with workers and cast members and studio staff or what have you, doesn't mean he has the best instincts in regards to how to run the division, because Kilar has been a pretty bad choice for Warner Brothers, to say the least,
Yeah. And Josh, you're not off the hook yet, buddy. We'll get to you, but on some other show.
Ooh, that would be a good OrangeNerd episode. I'd like to get into that. That's interesting.
But yeah, Chapek and Josh D'Amaro. I know we're coming off. Uh, some people might say, "Oh, you're evangelizing about Chapek." Trust me, I got issues. But these particular issues, it's not the way it's being represented, folks. I'll just say that.
Yeah, yeah. And then it goes on here. I'm not going to go through every paragraph because some of the stuff is kind of repeating a lot of stuff. But
it does. They do talk about Pete Docter and Pixar.
Oh, let's do that.
Right.
Let's go that. Did I miss that? Let me see. Hold on one sec.
It's a little bit up there.
Oh, here it is.
Yeah.
Right here.
Mm-hmm.
Right here. Okay, so there have been signs of tension within Disney as well. In April, the Insider reported that Pixar's Pete Docter was unhappy with the decision to skip theatrical and put Soul on the service in December 2020. Animators were said to be dismayed when Disney put Luca directly onto the streamer, which was a huge mistake because Luca has been kicking major ass on Disney Plus. It probably would have done great in theatrical.
Oh, man.
And then it says here, Soul went on to win an Oscar for Best Animated Feature, eligible to compete only because of pandemic rules. Look, like Luca has been doing really well, which is probably why they're going to release the Luca short on Disney Plus Day, because it seems to be a pretty viable franchise.
Yeah.
But Pete Docter's not too thrilled. I have a feeling, though, that's going to change. I have a feeling you're going to see
think so.
The next Pixar movie in theatrical because of how... Not even so much because Pete Docter is making noise. Luca did, from what I'm hearing, Luca is performing very well on D+.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're going to ignore that. I think they're going to try to throw it in the theaters. But
I mean, I would say so. I mean, if you throw another Pixar film out to the wolves on D+ for free, I don't think that's going to go over well. I think if they've been quiet this whole time, I think they're going to make their voices known. But you have to go back into why they may have done that. I mean, that's just for market positioning of Disney+, honestly. I think they read, hey, look, we have a family entertainment brand that creates 3D animated content, and like Trolls 2, we can position our Trolls 3 or whatever. That was huge pandemic era, film. We can use these films to position G+ and stuff like that. And look, that's quite the thing to do to Pixar. It's quite the thing to do. So I'm sure morale there is, yikes. I don't know if that particular decision was worth it, but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, they have to make right with Pixar. They have to make right with Pixar. I mean, I'm a big streamer guy. I like day and date. I do. I do like day and date.
Right.
But you don't want to. Yeah, you don't want to do day and date at the expense of the morale of the entire studio. Yeah. You want to have a little bit of look. I mean, there's been Raya the Last Dragon was a Disney animation release, and that was at least premiere access. At least you had to pay for that.
Yeah.
I think you have to throw Pixar some bones here. I mean, at least do premiere access if you're going to do that. I just think that they need to. They can't just do another throw it on Disney Plus for free kind of thing for the next Pixar movie. They have to give them a chance. And Luca was I think that was a big mistake for Disney from Chapek's standpoint and Kareem Daniel. That was a big mistake. That movie would have done very well in theaters. That movie's performing very well. They blew it on that.
Yeah, that was just they just wanted to. It's just market placement, honestly. It's just they want, or sorry, I should say market positioning. That's what it was all about. It was just to position G+ into a better place than it was, and to bump up the subscriber numbers. And my thing with day and date, hybrid releases or format, distribution should never be at the expense of the product. Should never be at the expense of the content of the film or piece of art that you're creating. So. Man, that's a tough one because even like the Soul merchandise and the local merchandise that they may have produced, it didn't sell all that well, and I think a large part of that was because it kind of went under the radar as a kind of D+ kind of film that they just kind of threw out there, and that's kind of heartbreaking.
It is. It is heartbreaking because I absolutely love Luca. I love that movie.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, this is a little bit of a juicy paragraph here. It says here that Iger says it was he who chose his moment to step aside. Right? He says plans for him to give away to Chapek as CEO began to take shape around Thanksgiving of 2019. When he was a few months shy of his 69th birthday. By then, other internal candidates had come and gone, which we'll address that because I'm really much against just focusing on internal candidates. But it says here, Iger had a bake-off that caused one potential successor, Jay Verzullo, to leave in 2015. The industry believed Tom Staggs had been anointed when he was named COO in February of that year. But if so, Iger changed his mind and Staggs departed in 2016. Sources say Staggs heard from associates that Chapek had actively undermined him. Staggs declined to comment. That left Peter Rice, chairman of General Entertainment Content, but though he had been through a lot of grooming in film and TV during his years at Fox, he had been at Disney less than a year. Yeah. Kevin Meyer, who had been overseeing Disney Plus, was in serious contention, but sources say he had less operating experience than Chapek, and he exited after Chapek was named CEO. Now, here's the thing. This is very, very interesting to me. Mm-hmm. I am very much against this idea, and this is where I think Iger kind of blew it, okay? I don't agree with this idea of it. We have to focus on internal candidates because somehow they understand Disney more. I've always been against that mindset. Look, who you had with Michael Eisner, he came from Paramount. When Michael Eisner became the CEO, and Jeffrey Katzenberg too, I think Katzenberg, he wasn't at Disney. He came from was it Paramount as well, I believe? I think they both came from Paramount, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I believe. I mean, if he didn't, I mean, Michael Eisner had a working relationship with him. I believe it was from Paramount, but if we get that wrong, do apologize. But they had a very established working relationship before. In what capacity, I'm not quite sure. Yeah. But yeah.
He came outside of the company, and Michael Eisner paired with Katzenberg and Frank Wells did a very great job beyond a great. At least those first 10 years of Eisner was really, really fantastic.
Right. I think. Well, just to kind of before your point, I think a lot of that was because of where the company was, right? They didn't want to get somebody from within the company doing the same stuff that they had been doing. They wanted to kind of shake it up. That's why they brought out outside talent to do that. I think going from Bob Iger on, it's like we kind of want to stay on this road here, which is why that may have influenced that decision. I do apologize. I didn't want you. I didn't want to completely steer you off there, but I thought that context may be necessary to your overall point.
That is actually that is interesting. That's actually a very great point. Is that there was a different kind of mission, so to speak, from when Eisner came in and when Bob Chapek took over. You're right. Disney was not in a good position when Eisner took over. Disney was in a very good position when Chapek took over. So that's a fair point. Yeah, maybe in considering the situation on the ground, so to speak, when Chapek took over, you want to keep internal. I don't know. I would have given a little more interest though in some of these external candidates. Yeah. I think Peter Rice, I really like him a lot. He's young. Mm-hmm. He seems to get Hollywood. I don't think he would have been a terrible CEO at all. It's unfortunate, that I think he kind of got passed over because he wasn't internal. I do feel like, hey, look, here's the thing too. Bob Iger is kind of training, so to speak, Chapek for a year and a half. He admitted in the article, he's sort of helping him with the transition, yada, yada. I mean, you would have had to do that you're doing that anyway with an internal candidate.
Right.
Now you got to do it with someone external. It's not, I don't know. I think it's kind of like, you're having to do it anyway. So why not just pick the right person regardless of where they come from?
Right.
But it's interesting. But there's rumors, and we've talked about on this channel, where Peter Rice has a more hands-on role right now with the Hollywood side of Disney because of the whole ScarJo thing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. Now we don't know. That's a rumor. But it is interesting because once we heard that rumor of Peter Rice kind of coming in, and kind of having a more hands-on role with talent and Hollywood, that's when we started to see things kind of get cleaned up a little bit with ScarJo and various other talent. So
yeah, maybe hopefully they can spread a little bit of that pixie dust over to some of those what is it? Notice of termination suits that they have going on, but that's a whole other story. Look, I think to your point before I completely crapped on it. I really do apologize about that, by the way. Okay. As early as like 2015, I remember hearing conversations about how the company was looking at outside talent as well as inside talent for the next CEO, and they were kind of open about, hey, yeah, we're looking at all kinds of candidates, for this position. I think it was it 2015? I mean, it could have been even earlier than that. It could have been like, I don't know, like 2012, 2013, something like that, where they were kind of looking at just about everybody. But I think for the board, I think they got a little bit nervous. It's like, hey, are we going to get somebody with the values that we want to stick with, that we want to remain consistent going forward? Because I think Iger, in the eyes of the board, he did it so well. And to get somebody of kind of similar values or with his blessing, I think that was really kind of important to them. And I think when push comes to shove, I think they wanted to stick with internal than external. But I do agree. I think, look, if it's a qualified candidate, they should at least get a passing glance and maybe put or placed into a role where they can kind of flourish. It's kind of hard kind of a hard sell to go, hey, he's been with Disney 1 year, let's make him CEO. But like you said, qualified candidate, no matter where they come from.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm also very curious, and this is kind of digressing a little bit.
Sure.
But when Bob Iger does leave in December, because right now I believe he's chairman of the board, right? From what I understand.
He is, yeah.
So who's going to be chairman of the board when he leaves? That's another interesting.
You've been watching a lot of Succession lately.
Love that though.
No, absolutely. That is the question. That is the like who, because I mean, conceivably Chapek could be chairman as well.
Yeah.
Do you place him in that role? I think if we're looking at the confidence of the board in Chapek, if the board is confident in Chapek's abilities going forward, then they will have made him chairman. If they don't, I think that's gonna be interesting to watch as well.
It will be. Very interesting.
Because that says a lot, right?
Says a whole lot. It says a whole lot who they make chairman of the board, and it says a whole lot too. If Bob Iger extends his time as chairman, that's also a big vote of no confidence for Chapek, I think, because he wants to stick around and kind of watch things. So if Bob Iger, if there's some announcement in November, Iger's going to stick around another year as chairman. Then you have to, then you got some issues.
You do. That would be a pretty big upset.
That would be a big upset. And here's the other thing too, is like the article kind of paints it as like Chapek is kind of like this big threat to Disney and the industry, right?
Yeah.
And they're kind of painting it as like Iger kind of sees that now, right? He sort of sees that and he's worried, right?
A little bit, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? He's kind of concerned. He's trying to the final warning. Remember at the Alani meeting, the final warning and all that stuff.
Warning, yeah.
If that's true, if we're assuming that this is true and that the Hollywood Reporter is 100% accurate in what they're saying, Iger can't wait. Like what I'm trying to say is like if he really does believe this, that this is a huge problem with Chapek, he's going to have to call a board meeting sometime before he leaves and vote on this to either remove Chapek or leave him, because I just find it kind of weird. Like he's this big threat to Disney and the industry, but we're just going to like wait and see. You know what I'm saying? It don't really go together. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It doesn't really go together. So either he's this big threat who is a problem for not only Disney, but the industry, because Disney's a huge market share of the industry, or he's not.
Yeah,
So I think that if this is true, I think there has to be some sort of vote or some kind of movement
there has
on
to.
that before he leaves. There has to be.
If Chapek's not the guy, there has to be a move between now and December. Like you're right, and this goes into, we'll speculate a little bit off from the article just for a second.
Yeah.
We've talked about you know what is it, Feige and Iger, and it's like, we're seeing all this drama from Marvel. We're seeing, kind of these pieces come out from tabloids and stuff like that. We've had asserted by others that there's, and us as well, that there's this kind of agenda going after Chapek, right? And it's like, where is that stemming from? And if it was really Iger, why is he telling everybody, hey, yeah, give him time, that kind of thing?
Right.
I think, thinking about it more, because I think the last time we talked about this, it was like, where is this all coming from? And I couldn't give you a definitive answer on whether it was going to be, Iger or Feige. And I kind of alluded to this before. I think for Iger's case, do you think that Chapek himself is, because he kind of vouched for him and he kind of said, hey, this is the guy. Do you think that Chapek's performance is potentially a reflection of Iger's legacy?
Oh, that's interesting.
If Chapek goes belly up, does that say something about Iger and his decision making?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I think that the Chapek success or failure, at least in the next year or two, is very much like, look, if Chapek is CEO for 10 years, what Chapek does 7 years from now has nothing to do with Bob Iger. You know what I'm saying? But like in the next year or two, I think that this is very much tied to Bob Iger's legacy. Look, Bob Iger, whether it was a last resort decision or whatever, he was on all these financial shows on CNBC and what have you, saying, this is the guy. This is the guy that myself and the board voted on to put as CEO. So this definitely has, in my opinion, I think he's got a huge stake in this. It looks bad on Iger if the guy that him and his board chose is a total failure. That doesn't help Iger's legacy at all.
It doesn't. So that's that kind of de-incentivizes Iger to see Chapek fail.
Right.
Which is why he may have stayed on. Now the other thing though is, on the flip side, you got Kevin Feige.
Right. Yeah.
And Feige might have an incentivization to see Chapek removed. And I'm not saying that, he's going to be CEO. I don't think he wants to be CEO. I think Feige's fine where he's at, but he wants control over the product he creates. And as we've said this whole time, he's reining in that control. He's reining in those kind of, those creative deferrals that Iger was just throwing out there. And that kind of questions, Feige's power, so to speak, right? I mean, that's in conflict with that. And so for him, there's an incentive there to say, hey, look, maybe we should switch this guy at the top out to somebody who will give me the control that I need and probably want for the MCU going forward, and some of these, other creatives who are kind of confiding in me as we speak. So that's why I'm kind of like leaning more towards Kevin Feige here. And it's like, this is all going on with Marvel. How much of this is orchestrated?
That is very interesting. And you can make the case like, well, Feige has a lot of clout at Disney. Why doesn't he just talk to Bob and Iger and just say, hey, I don't like this guy, vote him out? But it might make more sense from like a political, so to speak, standpoint to sort of sabotage him along the way. So when you get to the vote, you can kind of point to, hey, look, this happened, that happened, that happened. That happened. Basically what Kevin Feige is doing, he's setting traps along the way. So when the time comes to maybe vote on Chapek, he can kind of say, hey, look, you know what? These are the things that we've had issues with. These are the failings of the Chapek tenure. This is why I think he should be removed, instead of just kind of coming out the gate and saying, hey, remove him.
Right. Because that puts a target on his back if he does that.
Right. It puts a target on his back. So he's sort of setting these traps and sort of laying it out where he's kind of building a case. He's, a lot of times like law enforcement does this, they don't arrest the guy. And I'm not saying Chapek's a criminal. I mean, I want to make that very clear,
This is very interesting.
I kind of want to make an analogy.
Sure.
But law enforcement, a lot of times they won't just jump in and arrest the guy, right?
Yeah.
They kind of want to watch, let the guy hang himself a little bit, right? Kind of build up more charges or whatever, right?
Or evidence. Strengthen the case, yeah.
Exactly. Things that can kind of strengthen the case.
Right.
Could be the same kind of approach with Feige, where it's like, well, okay, I don't want to jump in and just say remove him. Let's build a little bit of a case here. So when we do ultimately decide of that, on that day to vote to remove him, I have a laundry list of stuff that supports my argument, right?
Right. Yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm kind of saying here. Now, look, we don't really know whether or not Kevin Feige is actually doing this.
No, right.
But
Speculation.
It does make sense, right? Why is it? I mean, we used to hear all kinds of drama from Lucasfilm, we heard drama consistently from Lucasfilm for years. I mean, it was crazy. These directors flying out and these creatives, saying, to hell with this, walking off, sets and productions and stuff like that. It's like, man, the constant drama out of that studio. And now, weirdly, it's all Marvel. Isn't that fascinating?
And that's the thing that's really interesting to me, because Pixar, like we touched upon earlier, has a vested interest in screwing Chapek over. They obviously
all do. They all do. They're all creatives, and they're losing control.
They're losing control. So why are none of these other studios? Everything is coming from the Marvel side. The ScarJo thing, the Russo brothers thing. It's all from Marvel. It's always Marvel. And even the talent that gets on Twitter and disparages Chapek. You have Simu Liu coming out and saying he's being insensitive with the experiment comment, and then you have, what's the guy, Drax, Dave Bautista?
Yeah, Dave Bautista. Yeah.
Oh my God, that guy's on Twitter every day ranting about,
Right, I know, right?
It's like, it's always the Marvel guy. I don't see Pete Docter going on Twitter saying, yeah, fuck Chapek, none of that. It's always the Marvel guy,
Right. It is always the Marvel guys. And you have to wonder. Now, look, Kevin Feige, he says the right things.
No, he does. He's a smart man.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He says, thing with Shang-Chi, that was a misunderstanding, or hey, like, he gave me the Dole Whip machine, all that kind of stuff. Like, he makes himself look to be like, hey, look, I just want to make my films, right. I think this guy's a cool guy,
right?
But like I said, he's been in this business for a long time, and he's had to deal with his own kind of people who are kind of vying for control, kind of speak.
Perlmutter,
that guy, Ari. Yeah, oh my goodness gracious, Ike Perlmutter, that's a great point. I mean, he single-handedly got that guy almost removed from Disney, so to speak. I mean, at least in the in this kind of letter of control. I mean, he brushed Ike Perlmutter aside. You got to give him that. I think it's Ari Savi, the gentleman who worked with Spider-Man for all those years.
Oh yeah.
Do you know who I'm talking about?
I know who you're talking about, and the name Rami.
It's not Sam Raimi, but it's another guy. It's the producers that worked on Spider-Man for a while. Let me just look up this name.
Yeah, Google it real quick and let's see who.
I can't find him. Let's see. But anyway, a strong personality within the industry, and he had his kind of vision of what he wanted Spider-Man to be, going back to the Sam Raimi days, which is why I bring that up. I cannot figure out his name. People are going, it's this name, come on. It's like, terrible. But I'm just saying that Kevin Feige, he's been around this he's been around
Yeah,
this industry for a long time, and he has seen these people who have worked on these films with these franchises with these characters and stuff like that. He's had creative power stripped away from him. He's
right.
had to see these characters die, just dog deaths at the box office, and he probably had some kind of he could have probably had some insight that was rejected or whatever, and it's like, oh, God, of course it died because they didn't do what I wanted to do. So everybody talks about, well, yeah, he grew from those experiences. He knew what to do and not what to do when he was given the position within the MCU to craft the Marvel Cinematic Universe as we know it today. But also too, he has navigated Avi Arad. That's who he is.
There we go.
Avi Arad. He has had to navigate these waters as well as producing these films.
Right.
And isn't it interesting? He's the one on top every single time.
Right?
Isn't it crazy?
It
You
is.
know what I'm saying, OG. Come on, you know what I'm
is.
saying.
It is. It's very, very interesting. It's
Mhm.
it's wild. It's wild. Feige really knows how to look. He knows how to play the game. He
Mhm.
really does. And it was interesting because a lot of people pointed out in this article how it was Feige who was kind of humanizing Chapek. He sent us the Dole Whip machine. Nice guy, real guy. Da 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 da. Very complimentary. A lot more than Iger. Iger was very, very kind of a lukewarm, kind of like give the guy a chance kind of thing. It was Feige who was kind of laying it on a little more thick, which is a
Mhm.
little more suspicious, right? I
It is
mean,
interesting. Are you compensating, Feige? Are you compensating? Mhm.
it's
This is
interesting.
why I'm like, I think something's going on here, and I think Feige's he's putting up front right now. It's going to be interesting to see if that mask slips or not.
Yep, absolutely. It'll be interesting to watch. Interesting to watch.
Mhm.
So we're gonna close out with these last two paragraphs. We're gonna
Yeah,
discuss this,
absolutely.
and it says here the critical question now is whether Chapek will ever be able to mimic the talent-friendly words that Iger said at the Alani and convince anyone that he means them. Quote, the single biggest topic is, does Disney now think its IP is more important than talent itself? End quote, says Greenfield. Quote, the question is, who is Bob Chapek? Now, that whole last thing, who is Bob Chapek,
Yeah.
is what we talked about the last video of like Mean Girls, you can't sit with us. That's a little bit of a like, oh, who's this guy sitting here? Who does he think he is? That's a little bit, okay. But it goes on. Hollywood will be watching closely to discern the answer. Iger says it will all become clear. Quote, he's very different from me, Iger says. Quote, that doesn't mean he can't do the job well. Give him time. It's only the fair thing to do. And again, this quote from Iger does not exactly show a sense of urgency that we saw throughout the entire article of, oh my God, Chapek is destroying Disney and the entire industry. Iger's like, yeah, give the guy some time. See how he does.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a completely different energy than I'm seeing from the first paragraph. Oh my God, this guy, Warner Media went under and Paramount, a former shell of itself, and now Disney might collapse and yada, yada, yada. Iger's like, yeah, give the guy time. See, that there is a disconnect there. For me,
There is.
Okay, if there really is a sense of doom and gloom, at any moment now, this guy's going to tank the industry or Disney. I think Iger is smart enough to know, hey, I got to step in and maybe vote this guy out before I leave in December.
Sure.
I don't know, maybe, before what are you going to do? Wait 2 years when you're not on the board?
Exactly, right?
Makes no sense. What do you think?
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this, obviously the writer was attempting to construct a narrative around this, and while also representing Iger's words fairly, but there is a disconnect there, and I think he's very much like, hey, I'm out. I've been out, but understands that, hey, look, I'm going to support Chapek, and like we said before, I think it's because his legacy is kind of dependent on it. He kind of wants to see Chapek succeed for selfish reasons. No better way to put it. But also too, I think that might be why he's like, still kind of hands on. He kind of wants to see Chapek, his son, so to speak, take on his values, and Chapek's like, no, I'm gonna do this the way I want. So I think that is where the struggle is.
Well, and it's interesting. We've kind of come full circle because I remember back in the day with Michael Eisner when they announced Bob Iger. Yeah. A lot of people in the fan community was like, oh, Bob Iger is a Michael Eisner yes man. Oh my gosh, that's why he was chosen, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
Right. And Bob Iger was far, far, far from an Eisner yes man. And, you know, now we're coming here into this where it's like, you know, Chapek's just going to kind of like, you know, just do whatever Iger wanted. Not the case. These men are their own. These men have their own. They're their own men. Basically, right? And they're going to do their own thing as to how they see fit. And, you know, Chapek is going to make changes that are going to be different than Iger. Iger even says that. He's a different person, a different human being. It's going to be different. And some things might be the same. Look, if you love IP and you love franchises, you got nothing to worry about. Nothing's going to change. It's going to be
exactly right.
As it always was.
Yep. Yeah.
We'll see. But thank you, brother.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I'm just saying. Yeah. Look, if you like Chapek's managerial style and some of the things he's saying, hey, good for you. He's going to double down on those things, I think. I think some things will improve, right? I think he was given a bad hand with this whole Pandy situation, and he's had to navigate these waters, and I'm sure he didn't want to make such strong decisions in like his first couple of months. So he might have wanted to drag those things out, maybe done some market research on some of these things, but his hands were not bind. Like he had to make these decisions or the company was going to go under. Like that's not great, right? So like I've said too, and I'll echo Iger's words here, let's give him a little bit more time as we come out of the Pandy and the effects of it and all the stuff that these decisions that he's kind of had to make. Let's see what he does with the full might of the Disney company running on all cylinders. So we'll see.
We'll see. But thank you, Vash, for coming on again. I appreciate you, brother. And if you could let everyone at home know where they can find you on social media.
Best place to find me is, to interact with me, it's going to be at Vash Scott. It's right down there, just like it's spelled. And to see me, thank you. I do appreciate it. To see me, I'm going to be on your channel, OrangeGirl55, at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juice, news, and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove. So it's the best place to see me. I hope to get... I keep saying this, but I hope to get more videos coming soon. There's so much going on in the parks right now. There's so many thoughts and all this kind of stuff. But man, it's been kind of a busy couple of weeks. Hopefully things will calm down, and should be getting more content out shortly.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride in honor of Mr. Toad. It really has. So, but thank you. Thank you, Vash, for coming on, and thank you all for watching and supporting the channel. Over the last 5 years, we both really, really do appreciate it. Comment below with your thoughts on this Hollywood Reporter article in regards to Bob Iger's long goodbye. The succession, the transition between the Bob Iger era and the new Bob Chapek era. What are your thoughts? Do you agree? Disagree? Comment below. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, have a wonderful day. Bye bye.
Thank you very much.